Hey everyone, Joe Menza here, and it's been a little while since I pulled out the Canson XL. This is 11 by 15, and going through all my pads that I have in the closet. I don't know, I'm a bit of a art hoarder. I think a lot of people end up doing that, and I just buy pads of paper, have success on one kind of paper, and so you run out and you buy a bunch of pads of that paper. Then you have something go wrong on that paper, and then let me try another paper. And paper can make or break some paintings, but sometimes you go back to it and it's like, yeah, this was pretty, decent paper, at least to practice on. And Canson XL is a decent overall paper, I will say. So here I am, I'm using, now this palette is all Michael's Artist Loft paint on this palette. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of make it like an old school artist palette and just have kind of all the colors going around. And I'm mainly using the Ron Ranson palette. I still am with the Ron Ranson Hake brush. I'm using like a warmer yellow. A couple of the colors you could have on there: raw sienna, a cad yellow hue, yellow ochre. All of those are in a similar vein, similar family. So I'm putting those on there. Now these, I'm trying to revive these colors because they dried out on the palette when I filled these, so which means you have to do more scrubbing with the brush. Not that that's a problem, because sometimes when you use the brush in that way, it can help control your paint. And if I squeeze it fresh out of the tube, I end up using more paint and really strong pigment on the paper. Again, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it may help your paint distribution if you have to work at it a little more off of the palette. In that case, it's kind of better, I think, almost to have like a tray where you can have a lot of room to work. But in this case here, I'm using a little alizarin, a little ultramarine blue. I kind of wanted this yellow, I don't know, sort of a cloudy sky. Could be midday. That was the reason why I wanted to practice. I wanted to just try this paper again and do a little cloud, maybe throw something on the bottom. And I try to video a lot of my scenes just to see, it's really good to video. I got to tell you, I've been reviewing a lot of my videos from years ago, and I'm telling you, it's really helpful to see where you were, how you progressed, and even if you're not doing social media, record if you can. You can still set up a YouTube and have your videos unlisted. You don't have to share them with anybody, just to have a place to store them. But it's really good to record yourself painting. And you can remember when you do a painting, you say, gee, I wonder how I did that. How did I do that? It's almost like you are your own instructor, and you're making videos for yourself to teach you how to paint later on. When you go back and you review certain things, it can be very, very helpful. I've made these videos to share with everyone, to inspire them to paint, to pick up a brush and have the enjoyment that I discovered when I started doing it. And that's why I started making them. But, of course you want to get better. You want to improve. You want to, progress. And so I think that's a great way to do that. Now here, I'm just throwing a little something on the bottom. I don't know, maybe a little left or right turn of some little river maybe going around. I want to retain that glow coming from the sky. For me, a lot of the landscape paintings, the light is really what makes it. You'll hear a lot of artists say this, will say the light or the counter change, which is the contrast between the dark and the light. Those are the paintings that really, I think, jump out at you. Maybe some people are really pulled in by bright colors, and if that's you, then you pursue that. Say, I like a lot of color. I like a really vivid painting. Then you do that. But I think there's something to be said about these atmospheric, bright scenes. Now, you notice this brush I'm using. It was a brush I found. I forget, at some art shop. And it had a unique brush pattern to it, like the bristles. And of course, there's another thing I was hoarding was brushes. I have tons of brushes, more brushes than I need. And if you're going to paint like this, you only need the large, I'd say medium Hake, a rigger brush, and a flat brush. That's all you're really going to need. Save your money, save your budget. I'm taking a little of this sap green, put a little green on top of here. I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm just winging it, trying to make something interesting. Again, I'm making up as I go along. Actually, by mistake, got a little bit of red on the brush, which is fine. There could be some little red flowers on the ground. You know, it could be some little area on Earth that you came up to and you saw this little cove or inlet. I don't know what you would call it. Sometimes I get writer's block on what to name some of these videos. You know, obviously you want to say watercolor painting. You know, that's what it's mainly about. But then you have to name your painting. Now, I saw an artist on YouTube. He was all about naming your painting before you do it. In other words, think of something you want to do, name it, and then you paint it. You're painting it, and you already have the name set up, so it comes to fruition. I thought that was an interesting angle. See, now that I'm putting these little details in here, I'm using the bristles of the brush kind of spread out, and the brush is dry. And when I press that against the paper, I get the very fine, almost little leaf patterns. See, now I'm having to really rub this to get the color I want on the end of this brush because the paint isn't wet. It's not fresh from the tube. And then I'm going to zoop it in, and I'll put a little branch going that way. And this is what I used to like to do all the time, is I just didn't want to keep doing the same thing all the time, but I would always put a foreground tree in. This way it would kind of push things back a little bit. It would give you a little foreground element. And I mean, what else are you really going to do? I mean, you're painting houses, you're painting trees, rocks, a large bush or something like that. And so a tree really fits in as like your super foreground element. And they're fun to paint as well. Now I used my palette knife, plastic palette knife, to scratch that, create a little bit of bark. I'm going to take my rigger brush. And I mentioned this before. This was a really, really fine, almost like a needle rigger brush I found at Michael's. And if you could find this, I highly recommend it. It's like having a really, I mean, it's really fine. Look at that. Just kind of wiggle that in there. And you can make really fine little branches. You can put as many as you want in there. You can make just a tree. You could just do tree pictures. You know, one thing is kind of hard because when you start doing these paintings, it's like, okay, you got to know how to paint a bush. You got to know how to paint water. You got to know how to paint a sky and make all of that come together. Maybe just grab one book and all your paintings in there are a tree. Different shapes, different sizes, different branches, with leaves, without leaves. And then do foliage, a bush. I did this early on. I would do like, okay, I'm just going to do trees. I'm just going to try to do like water. Although water, you need a little something to kind of sell it around the water. But you try to make all of these elements come together in one painting. And then it's like, okay, well, I like my tree, but I don't like the bush. I like the water, but I don't like this. So like there's invariably elements that you don't like. I'm going to put a little bit of foliage, grass. See, you flick this brush and it creates almost like grass. And pop in a couple birds with my Micron pen and grab a little bit more brown, kind of accentuate these rocks underneath that I scraped out. Always anchor those rocks. Back in the day, I didn't. I used to just scrape them and leave them, and they kind of just look like they're floating there. So it's good to go back, and that's when you save for your darkest darks at the very end. And just see, things are starting to dry. When you're like 10 minutes through your painting, all the other elements are drying. So anything that's dark is going to be lighter than, you know, when you laid it down. And then I take my brush, my soft, dry brush, and I can use that to like blend. I can use it to soften areas. I'll just put a couple little details on here. See, we're not getting caught up in details. We're just having fun. Just putting a few little grasses popping up. When you stand back and you look at your painting, all of those little elements will sell it. And I'll sign it here, and that's it. I hope you enjoyed this one. I enjoyed showing it to you and sharing it. Here's the finished one in a matte. I will see you guys on the next video.